That's what I thought.
Yeah, I don't ever. Of course, my little whaler doesn't weigh 3,000 pounds, but I never take it off.
Well, that's what this thing weighs.
I just broke it down to the floater and figure like.
Well, I can do a definite. I'm used to hurricane tie down when I used to be with the two boats at Patriots Point, but now.
But there was a time where we.
I'm thinking of taking this little guy off the lift.
I agree with all on this.
And tie it up with about 7 different lines and spring lines.
I agree.
Well, good to see him.
Yes, sir. Nice to see you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, that was great.
Yes.
Is Tori? Is Tori? I would say Tori by Zoom.
Hey, James.
Got a bunch of these draft staff comment recommendations.
Yeah, I think so. Yes,
It's extras. Extras, I guess.
Yeah, I thought maybe you could come back.
Yeah, so. So you just read this protocol letter. It's great.
yeah, I am paraphrasing sometimes. Just keep it moving. I mean, we've been saying the same thing for months and months and months. You know.
So I realized something was when I was walking in with the project manager. Yeah, so you and I talked.
So yeah.
This is what I'm talking about. So
Yeah, I had a conversation with Tori a while back. College in Charleston, he was every time, and each one of those agencies has a I'm directed all of them mock up over Simmons, but like, MUSC's got 70 president. I'm not having anything to do with that. I would have trouble with it because I knew I'd seen this guy's money ordinance.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't really do it much anymore. Because I feel like I understand what's going on in the studio, but I used to send our agendas around. Phyllis Ewing would do that. She'd send her agendas around to the whole firm in Moorman Howard. And that can get tough because a lot of these some cryptic LLC.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I learned that too. Yeah. Are you there?
I'm here. And we are streaming.
An extra bottle of wine, just watch it. Pretty much my way.
That would be fine. So it's not going to give us, you know?
Ready? The recording's on and all that. Yes.
Oh, because it's visible in like a 30-second delay. And you don't see that.
Good, Lawrence?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Would everyone please take a minute and check your electronic devices and make sure they're turned to the off position. Thank you. This is the September 28, 2022 BAR large in-person meeting, and it's being held in the public meeting room at 2 George Street. My name is James Schmetters, and I'll be serving as chair this afternoon. The other board members present are Jay White, Luda Subject, Seton Brown, and Carol Wheeler. City staff is represented in person by Lawrence Courtney and by way of Zoom, Tori Parrish. The order of the meeting will be as follows. Introduction and overview of the project by city staff to the board and for the public. The application presentation, which has a 10-minute time limit or as determined by the chair, and any questions of the applicant by the board or staff. Any and all presenters should clearly state your name for the record. Persons affiliated with the project, owners, developers, designers, consultants, etc., should speak during this portion rather than the public comment section. The written public comment will be due by noon the business day before the meeting and transmitted to the board members as soon as possible thereafter. Unless determined by the chairman to the contrary, these written comments will not be read aloud during the meeting. Followed by the comment section, or the public comment section, a 2-minute time limit per person or as determined by the chair. Applicant does not respond to the comments made during the public comment section. Please clearly state your name and address for the record. This will be followed by city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant will then have an opportunity to respond or clarify to the public comment or city staff comments / recommendations. We'll have a 5-minute limit, and the applicant then takes a seat and only speaks if called upon. We'll then go to board discussion and vote. The applicant presentation and public comment is now closed. Applicant may clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising a hand and waiting to be called. There are no items that have been withdrawn, right? Okay. Please limit your comments to architecture only. Comments related to zoning, such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, and livability concerns are not the purview of this board and cannot be voiced here. There are a few other items for protocol. Please read along with me. The applicants have been required to register and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. The staff will control the slide presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirement. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicant, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. During the public comment section, all applications heard today are part of the public meeting format. Written public comment received by the deadline of noon the day before the meeting, provided to the board members 24 hours in advance of the meeting, is acknowledged into the record and summarized. Members of the public who wish to be heard in person during an agenda item's public portion shall announce their name and address for the record. And board members will be polled by the chairperson for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member when voting should respond yea in favor or nay not in favor. The chair shall reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chair if he has not reread the motion carefully. Results will be posted on the city website at www.charleston.sc.gov/BAR. Larson. leave anything up? No. Nice job. So the item number 1 on the agenda is approval of minutes from the September 14, 2022 meeting. Any questions or comments?
I reviewed them and found them acceptable as submitted, so I'll make a motion for approved as submitted.
Jay has made a motion for approval. Is there a second? Second. Seeing no seconds, any further discussion? All those in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Carol will abstain. Application number 2, 54 St. Philip Street.
54 St. Philip Street is the Simmons Center for the Arts requesting final review of the sample panel. This is new construction, therefore it's not rated. It's in the Height District 4 to 6 and in the Old City District.
Good evening, I'm Robert Ryan with the Wedding Turner Contracting Company. Representing the knockout we presented yesterday. Just want to thank you guys for your time and walk-in last night on the extension review. And here for any questions that may arise.
Thank you.
We've got some context slides for you.
We kind of got out of order there a little bit, but that's fine. Are there questions for the applicant?
I do have one question regarding the column that has been wrapped around spinach.
Yes.
So on those photos, I'm not sure if you can see that here, but you could see the well joint. It wasn't really ground smooth and it wasn't continuous. It was just for a couple of inches. What's the plan for the actual column?
For the actual column, we will do a full thing as well, and then we can work to have that as a ground, well as smaller, not as trouble.
See, Luda, questions? Yes. So I had a couple of questions which we discussed yesterday, but I just wanted to get on the record. Where the walls come down and sit on that concrete base, and there were varying thicknesses of the joints where there were returns where it just kind of had to be filled. Those will all be more uniform in the final application.
That is correct. On full wall height, we'll have the traditional layout. So you start with the brick going to the bottom.
Thank you. Yep, Karen.
Talking about the brick coursing there, so do you plan to slope that bench, the precast concrete?
Yes, it works with the grade from the footer that's underneath. So the bench will be horizontal on the top, and then as you walk grade down to the street level, the vertical portion of that will grow.
At the top will be level.
The top will be level, yes.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. No, we need to do step comments first.
Take care. Oh. Sorry, public comments. Staff comments.
All right, regarding staff comments. Number 1, staff has worked with the applicant to smooth out some of the rougher aspects of the sample panel, which primarily included parapet coping and the uniformity of brick joints. 2, due to the unavailability of getting the special mortar mix used on the mock-up, a separate brick panel was constructed with a different, more standard mortar, but which shows the proposed workmanship for the brick. The mortar color shown on the mock-up will be used on the building rather than that on the additional brick panel. 3, it is understood that some of the mock-up elements, such as the glazed brick, inside and outside corners will be solid on the building, but are presented here in 2 pieces, since these are specialty items. 4, the color of sealants around windows and doors, control joints at lintels and other elements need to be better generalized brick mortar blended color than what is currently on the brick sample panel. Staff can work with the applicant to find a better match. And 5, staff wonders if the single column at the entry canopy may be better painted to match the other metal elements for consistency. Therefore, the staff recommendation is approval with board and staff comments.
Thank you. you have an opportunity to respond to any of that comments.
I 1 through 4, we're in the agreement with what they were and only after that. Number 5, we can certainly go back to the architect and see what this.
Thank you. Thanks. So, board discussion.
I might start. I went out yesterday to the mock-up as well. Appreciate that the glazed bricks were there, even though we didn't see the final product yet. But I'm glad it still stayed in the project. Same with the baffles that were not present. So I suppose staff would see them or review them at a later point. There was one detail that wasn't on the mock-up that will be on the actual building where the glazed brick meets the standard red brick. And I think there was one location on the mock-up where you could see it, but it wasn't done very well, and there was no mortar, I think, in it. So I think it's important to see that detail because it's very prevalent along the facade. I mentioned that the column already, that there wasn't the welds were not nicely done. The soffit, the wood that was installed wasn't flush with the canopy, so there was not the final detail, I think. As Steph mentioned, there were a couple of other details. See the coping, the coursing of the brick. I think there's still a lot of projects, a lot of details, the plastic weaves that were sometimes flush, sometimes pushed back. So there were a lot of items that I think were not provable yet. I wouldn't give approval today. We could discuss.
I was out at the mock-up yesterday as well, and I agree with what Ms. Wheeler was saying, that the quality of the work was not its finest, but understanding that there were issues in supply chain, et cetera, and getting all of this taken care of, I would respect the applicant working with city staff to make sure that all of it is reconsidered or up to quality at the time of construction.
Just agree with staff comments and some of the board comments as well. So I would not oppose recommendation by staff. It's just some of the things can be really easily worked out on the field.
So in the past, supply chain issues have not been received in a positive way to the reason to not have a first-class mock-up. And yesterday we heard a couple of times whether it was the mortar, the grout line leaving the shoulders and the bricks exposed in one area to show what it was going to look like. It wasn't done that way in another area. The greenish brick not having the transition piece, so there was a grout line there, a cut line there, as opposed to correctly transitioned brick, and that I think that was a supply chain issue. But it's difficult to look at what should be the mock-up for the project and see this is what our finest work is going to be. This is how the rest of the project is going to look, and it doesn't look that way. It is clear to me that what is going to happen in the intent of what is going to happen, and felt there was, with the exception of those critical areas where materials were coming together, felt there was great attention given to the mock-up, and there was a lot of detail to it. But it is difficult with those key areas that are going to make the project not to see material and how it's actually going to fit. And my thought on that is I would like to ask the applicant if they have an idea of when that specialty brick will be here?
Yeah, it'll be, should be here in November. So we can do a first inspection, if you will. Do a smaller piece of it, show the panel with the actual angles and whatnot, and then we can bring it back out to review that, see the actual install versus what we're working with on the mock-up.
And whether or not the board is comfortable with that being done at the staff level will be determined by a motion that's yet to be made. In this situation, I would be comfortable with that being done at the staff level. That's just my opinion.
Same here.
I think the issue were not only supply chain issues, but also some of the craftsmanship. I think the mini brick mock-up clarified that, and there was a very good quality, but in some areas caulk wasn't installed yet, and the soffit, the wood soffit on the canopy wasn't really put in place. And I think we're sending the wrong message to the contractor to say give a partial approval. But I think what I would do is I could make a motion. So I would make a motion for deferral of the mock-up with board and staff comments and further review by staff. Staff is comfortable with reviewing the remainder of that process.
Okay, Carol. Motion for deferral of mock-up with board and staff comments with final review by staff.
Or further review by staff.
Which means that you would want it to come back. You would want to go and look at it again.
I mean, I think staff should be, if staff is comfortable looking at it further, that would be fine. So I don't think it needs to come back with this motion.
Doesn't look like it's different from approval.
Yeah, then I would amend the motion to final approval with board and staff comments and further review by staff. Or final review by staff. Is that
Okay.
accurate?
Motion for deferral of mock-up with board and staff comments with final review by staff.
I wouldn't make that motion, but you can certainly make that.
Fair enough. Well, no, you have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to Carol's motion?
Will you repeat your motion?
Sure. Motion for deferral of mock-up with board and staff comments with review by staff, further review by staff.
Makes sense.
Right, so if there's not a second to that, is there another motion?
I'll motion for final approval of the mock-up and approval by staff. That's not right.
Motion for deferral of the
No.
mock-up with final review. by
Not
staff.
deferral, approval.
Final approval with board and staff comments.
Is that your motion? Final approval of board and staff comments?
Yes, sir. Yes. With final review by staff, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, final approval with board and staff comments with final review by staff. All right, is there a second to that?
I don't second that.
With a seconded, I'll call any further discussion. I'll call Ms. Wheeler.
Nay.
Nay, not in favor, Ms. Brown.
Yea in favor.
Yea in favor, Ms. Subject. Yea in favor, and I vote yea in favor also. So carries.
Thank you all. Are we all settled back in the room?
We are not.
Okay.
We are in review.
Give me a sec.
Can't see anything much. Okay. Agenda item number 3 is 838 Morrison Drive requesting an after the fact approval for fresh air hooded intake covers. This is new construction. It's in the historic corridor district. All right, contact slides. We've got an aerial for you here. This is on the east side of Morrison Drive. And these are photos from prior to the new construction. All right, we're ready for the applicant.
Thank you, Tori. I'm Chuck Travis, principal of the Housing Studio. And as Tori told you, we're here tonight to present to you an exterior vent cover for a fresh air intake that was not represented on our sample plan. So the information that you have here sitting on the screen, you see a master plan of a site. As you know, we have a mid-rise and a high-rise building on top of a parking podium. We illustrate where these vent covers occur. We've also given you the specification for this actual vent cover. And one thing I need to correct is that it does show a flap inside. This is a fresh air intake, so it does not have the flap because it has to have contact flow. These intakes are for the fresh air that's servicing units, actual individual residential units, but primarily for the corridors in the building. This is the fresh air intake to bring the air obviously in that's fresh and to be circulated throughout the building. In addition, we've given you 2 different photographs where we've enlarged where you can see the vent hoods where they're ganged together. Which represents the mid-rise and the high-rise. I'll be more than happy to have any questions and further discussion. Thank you.
Any questions by the board? Or is there any written public comment?
There's no written.
Or public comment? City staff.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 1, staff has asked the applicant to request an after the fact approval from the board for hooded air intake grill covers after exploring and exhausting other options. 2, fresh air intake grill hoods were specified by the mechanical engineers to provide fresh air intake for the corridors and read as the same as dryer vents on building elevations at each floor level in certain locations. 3, a good deal of information and staff comments regarding the avoidance of hooded vent and grill covers, as well as discussions on site during installation of dryer vent covers, failed to reveal the existence of the hooded covers until they were in place. And 4, in the sizable set of drawings on this rather large project, these were not noticed by staff and the design team until they started appearing on the building. The staff recommendation is staff is satisfied with the applicant has attempted to find alternative solutions to these hooded covers without success and regretfully recommends after the fact approval.
Do you have any comments that you'd like to make in response to Tori's comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a true representation of what has occurred. I know we did try to exhaust different opportunities to perhaps lessen the impact. In a wood frame building, which is what our mid-rise is, you need to go horizontally as opposed to vertically. They do appear on the high-rise and the mid-rise buildings. We try to put them as inconspicuous as possible. They are painted to match the brick color that you see on the other vents. And I do think they've been put in a craftsman-like manner on the building. And just like all the other vents that we've handled on the building, it's something that we need, obviously, for the operation of the structure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Board discussion?
Well, based off of the staff comments and the applicant's presentation, I'm not sure that this is properly an after-the-fact request, because if this was in the documents that were approved by staff and final review, then it may be surprising, and it is different from what we normally would like to see in conditions like this. But considering that you can't put a flap on an air intake, there really is no other option. So I'm comfortable with approving this.
Thank you.
See, Kara?
I'm also comfortable, and it's not directly on Morrison Drive, it's in the recessed areas and in the rear of the buildings.
I'll introduce a motion for approval.
Jay has introduced a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Jay's introduced a motion for approval. Kara has seconded it. Is any further discussion? Jay, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Buddha, how do you
Yay
vote?
in favor.
See, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Kara?
Jane in favor.
And I vote yea in favor also. Thank you very much.
All right, agenda item number 4 is also 838 Morrison Drive. This one is requesting final approval for design of the Waterville kinetic sculpture to be located in the central courtyard at Monumental Stairs. We're gonna have some of the same context slides. All right, ready for the
Give us just 1 second. There you go, sample. Yeah, and we'll move it closer to you so you can actually see it close. This is a little bit of a continuation. of
Again, just for the record, introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. Chuck Travis, principal of the housing studio. This is a little bit of a continuation of a conversation we had at our last presentation regarding a future phase at Morrison Yard. This was the kinetic wall material that we were discussing then. Part of the issue was that how can we start to tie some of our phase 1 with phase 3? We felt like this kinetic wall that we've always planned to have on phase 1, presenting to you tonight, would have an opportunity to show up again on phase 3. So that's why we had this last week while we're here back again tonight to present this to you as a follow-up. We're really excited about this opportunity because, as you may recall, for those of you on the board, that we presented this initially when Morrison Yard was under consideration for the multifamily and the mixed use of some office space and also retail. It's that we wanted a water fountain in the center and this incredible courtyard space that we created. And what we and we've always known this because I've been doing this for a number of years. You know, today's fountain sometimes turns into tomorrow's planter. And we didn't want that to occur here. We wanted it to be a long-standing art installation or something that simulated a water feature to actually make that space extremely important and special. And so if you'll go to the next slide, please. So this was the approved final set of drawings that we submitted. This is Seaman and Whiteside's drawing that actually identifies that we had replaced what was originally a water fountain with a kinetic wall. And you can see the detail where it calls it out. And this is the specific location. If you go to the next slide, please. This also illustrates it in 3 dimensions, and you can see that it's in the center of this space that I just mentioned to you, which I hope one day will become a really incredible space for some spalato events or outdoor activities. So it really becomes a community gathering space. And that's why I think the signature piece is so important, and we spend a lot of time working on it. It's always been illustrated like this to you, and so tonight we give the opportunity of actually showing you the proposed installation. Lawrence, can you go to the next one, please? A more up-to-date photograph of where it's located on the building. And you can see from the previous illustrations that it's not only on the wall, it's at the lowest part of the base of the stair, but it also goes up so it ties into the upper level. That's above a doorway. So from a distance, you really see these 2 elements tying together, and you know where the center of the space occurs. Go to the next diagram. I'm going to turn this over to Alberto, who has spent a lot of time with the artists that we're working with to help make this happen. I just want to clean up a little bit.
I knew it.
It's kinetic.
Category 1.
Hopefully we're making our history here. My name is Alberto Villacevallos, and I am the Waterville's creative director. I am lucky to have crazy creative friends. And one of them is Mr. Ned Khan. He's an artist from San Francisco. I sent him some sketches of what we wanted to accomplish, and we wanted to create something. And we had three principles really. We wanted something that had materials that were gonna, last and were gonna be really great. We wanted it to be simple, and we wanted it to be to the perfect scale, not too big, not too small. And that took those sketches, and I think he created something that actually surpassed what we even thought we could do. So if you can go to the next slide, please. There's something beautiful and poetic about being able to capture something that sometimes is intangible and make it tangible for a time or two, and actually being able to grasp what wind is and see it actually enact. You normally see it on the leaves, on the trees, but never in a vertical way that we're going to be showing it. Here are some pictures of the modulations of the screen, and it's just, letting nature choreograph this. It's just such a beautiful, simple, sculptural thing. You can go to the next page, please. How the kinetic sculpture going to be attached to the fountain. We have created a recess on the monumental wall where we're going to have a metal frame that's going to be anchored to the wall. The metal frame is going to have panels where the kinetic panels is something we wanted to create was something modular, just in case in any point of time, 2x4, when there's a hurricane hit the panels, we had a way of actually replacing them and keeping these really well. So having it modular was extremely important to us. So the modular pieces that have been created are going to attach to that infill panel. And we've been exploring using some sort of polycarbonate substrate to be able to screw the kinetic panels using stainless steel number 6 screws too. The panels themselves are created out of UV protected polycarbonate, which is going to be it's going to last probably 300 years. And then the dials and the studs that connect them that are fused to the polycarbonate panel are made out of stainless steel. The shape and the scale of it actually are extremely important because the thickness of the actual material helps us for two reasons. One of them being that it allows any small movement of air to activate the screen. But at the same time too, when there's a lot of wind, there's not a lot of uplift because the dials actually bend really fast. So they will be able, and a variation of this wall had gone through a hurricane and the buildings didn't make it, but the wall extended out, which is a good thing. Hopefully that doesn't happen ever. And then also the shape of the dials, we actually worked really hard because we had multiple different shapes, but the circular shape had gravity actually work in our favor because it helps it detangle automatically with gravity. So there's no sharp edges that actually make it tangle, thus creating friction, thus creating uplift and problems like that. So it always looks the same way, which we think is really beautiful. The scale of the dials is about 1 inch, and it's going to be 3 times the width and 3 times the height for the panel below, which we think that 1 inch scale is just the perfect scale. You're probably experiencing the length that most people are going to experience it. There's a stage in front and there's vegetation and landscaping in front of it too. So that's kind of like the perfect sweet spot. Lawrence, we can go to the next slide, please. And that's the elevation where the water veil is going to be at. We want to uplight the veil, and we understand the lighting is really important, and we don't want to pollute. So we're going to have the lights. They're going to be dimmable. That way we can actually have control of how much light we're putting in there. That way the installation is a 24/7 installation. During the day, it's reflecting the overcast skies, and during the night, it's reflecting the beautiful light that is just flowing on it, which will be kind of theatrical. And the next slide, please, Thomas. Now the fun part. I'm gonna try to check it. The panel is not super. That's like it's a little ring.
What if it's coming from this side?
Yeah, so the beauty of the pivot, because it's a 360 pivot, it captures wind from every angle.
But stand in front and just leave it stand in front. Thank you.
Do it again.
It doesn't work in this thing.
And that's it. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alberto. Are there any questions from the board and staff for Alberto?
Very quickly, is that will be the same on other face of the apartment? Same board?
It's the same artist with a different design.
Yes,
correct?
that is correct.
I have a few questions. So one is the video that was sent out with it. A gentleman was using a hat to move the air. Can we see that instead of the air blower? Because I mean that's an air blower. I mean, granted we have Hurricane Ian approaching, but okay.
That's what it is.
Thank you. Yeah, so something a little bit more subtle. And then I wish that we had a picture of what the sunshine is right there. Because the only other concern I have is actually a concern that we had coming from the bridge is the light reflection out onto Morrison Drive. Because I mean, that's a little guy right here, but when it's massive, how distracting is it going to be to drive this?
Should not be. It's
I mean, yeah, I don't know how far back it is from this plan.
Yeah, it's pretty much at the very end of the courtyard, and that actually landscape and big trees that are planted. If you go to the picture of it, some of the landscape has not been completed yet, but there will be some full grown.
Yeah, because the lighting that we see here is at dusk and not in the middle of the day. Not this one, obviously.
Yeah, right.
It's for western face.
Right. So there will be some full-size trees here, and on the picture of the actually built picture, or where you can see the angle. Because yeah, we care about the reflections. I don't know if you can switch to that orange.
Street trees will block them too, I think.
Do you anticipate that's probably about 60 to 80 feet from the right of way? Okay.
So it's pretty far.
It's an interesting question. See, the sun will be in the afternoon coming in that direction.
It will be beautiful.
It may be.
It can be many things.
Are there, Jay, any other questions? I brought this up for the other project, but I understand the polycarbonate material, but is there other than polycarbonate material? The fasteners, the small wires, the hanging mechanism between each one of the discs, what is all of that material?
So the dials are stainless steel. The studs that connect the stainless steel to the polycarbonate panel are stainless steel as well. And then the frame is going to be an aluminum extrusion that is going to match the color of the panels. So the color palette is just going to be two colors. You're going to have stainless steel and the dark color, and that's it. That way the dials will pop. And then this gets screwed in, and it's an ejection molded panel. So it's going to be really accurate, and it already have number 6 stainless steel screw holes on them. So I don't know if you eventually, I can bring it closer to you so you can see it, but it's actually just going to have stainless steel screws, just like it does now. You can barely see them, but.
So, Alberto, is there anything that is not stainless steel
On the panel,
in the whole setup?
And polycarbonate.
Okay. I think,
the backing sheet's polycarbonate.
and the back's polycarbonate, right? And every other component, the channel at the top and all of the other fasteners are stainless, everything's stainless steel.
Well, the frame that goes into the wall, that's probably gonna be an aluminum extrusion. But the panels and the actual art inside the frame is gonna be stainless steel and polycarbonate.
Is it, is there an exhibit such as this somewhere else that's in a toxic environment like what we live in here in terms of the weather, salt water?
There is, he's worked with, I think he worked with Zaha Hadid, so there's some in the Middle East which have extremely corrosive salinity. And we can send you samples of that, but he's been doing this for a long time.
So my concern is limited to the material selection, as it could adjust the way that it moves as it deteriorates, but that material is fine. And then the general maintenance.
They're panelized as modules, we can always replace things.
Thank you. Lawrence, Tori? A written public comment or
There's no written public comment. for this
any
one.
comments from the audience today?
He had the same question I did. Thank
Okay, yeah, sure. Anybody else? Tori?
Okay, we have some staff comments. Number one, although initially presented as a water feature, this was changed to a sculptural piece to be designed at a later point, which was approved by the board at final review. Two, applicant is proposing a kinetic sculpture which would mimic the flowing of water and has engaged an artist specializing in kinetic sculptures to design one. Three, the workings of the sculpture are all passive and its composition is such that it should satisfactorily resist harsh environmental conditions. Four, staff is unclear as to how this kinetic sculpture will be resolved at its base and has spoken with the applicant about providing a similar kinetic sculpture at this base to mimic a pool effect. Recommendation is, while somewhat disappointed that a real water feature was not used here, staff finds this to be an interesting and engaging solution and recommends approval with board and staff comments with final review by staff.
Thank you. Board discussion.
I'm actually very comfortable with this, exactly as presented. Regarding staff comment number 4 about a pool at the base, this is an abstraction of that idea, and I would hate to force it to become more literal than the artist intends. So I would support approving it exactly as it's proposed.
To me, it's actually more interesting than water. Much more interesting, and it's kind of coming with the century of technology and public art. So, and again, that's not a water, then we don't need a pool. So, again, I'm comfortable with.
Thank you. See, Carol?
Forgive me, this is out of term. What's the artist's name?
Carol?
I just want to say I'm really excited to see coming out with the project. Yeah, I also agree that it's more interesting than a water feature, and it's really refreshing to see that. It would be nice to see that on other projects as well.
It's kind of leap forward for Charleston.
Yeah, I'll make a motion for approval. Period, which means they go from here to go.
Second.
Jay has made a motion for approval, which has been seconded by Luda. Is there any further discussion? Jay, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Luda, how do you vote? Stephen?
Yay in favor.
Carol?
Yeah, in favor.
And I also vote yay in favor, so it passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, agenda item number 5 is 2935 George Street, 306 King Street, and 84 to 88 Society Streets. Requesting conceptual approval for construction of 2 new buildings, Building A at George Street and Building B at Society Street, to include a hotel and mixed uses incorporating a portion of the existing building. This is new construction and it's in the Height District 6 and in the Old and Historic District. We've got an aerial showing you its location. And then some street photos. This is looking into the site from George Street. And this is from Society Street with the salvage building on your right. Got it. The site's on your left. This is at George Street. Site is on your right. And we've got some images from Society Street again. All right, and we're ready for the
I don't have any PowerPoint. My name is Mark Patoni with Patoni Architect. First of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to come back and further bring some further resolution and clarity to the project that we presented last month. What I thought maybe we can go through to the next slide and kind of go through some of the comments that have been addressed. So we've gone through and we responded to specific comments made by Cindy. And so one of the things that I wanted to sort of discuss, which brought up the opportunity, was a conversation, further conversation of the VAR last time in regards to context and the additional area that we asked and requested. So we can go to the next slide, please. So I just want to be clear that it was our sincere intention to respond to the context given this project, and I apologize if I wasn't made clear, and hopefully with this additional analysis we're kind of furthering that conversation with you guys today. So the first thing we wanted to do is we went through aerially and kind of took a survey and inventory of kind of the other existing buildings around our site. As you can see, we have a mix of 6 stories, 5 stories, 7 stories on the other side of King Street, an 8-story building. Also on the other side of King, we have a 14-story hotel. And then right across the street, we have the arena, which serves as kind of almost somewhere between the 7 and 8-story building in terms of its height and scale. The hotel directly across the street, and this is all in respect to the society side. That's a 6-story building. So you can go to the next slide. So this was an aerial view where we actually plugged our building. Our site is there on the left. And the intention of this diagram was to really understand it in relationship to King Street. And what was kind of interesting is that when you start to look at it in relationship, our project in terms of its scale and height isn't that dissimilar to what's going on sort of both on our side and also mirrored across the other way, and also a similar distance in respect to its distance from King Street. And I would actually argue in this particular view that our project actually kind of fills a gap in that context and kind of allows it kind of extends that continuity of the scale of the other projects in their relationship to King Street. Next slide. And so to respond to Mr. Metter's earlier comments about sort of aerial views and ward views and how we're actually looking at the project and how it fits into the skyline, you can kind of see we placed this into Google Earth accurately, and this kind of shows how it sort of, hopefully in these views, actually kind of fades away. It doesn't really create much noise, both on the skyline and also just sort of contextually as it is to see. Next slide. We have these are specific comments that are basically addressing some of the city's comments, staff comments, things at the site plan level, sort of additional recessed doors in the storefront on the door side, doors recessed at the lobby, some clarification that we stated on what the awning cantilever is. It's 3 feet. I know that for sure this time, so there will be no wavering on that. Also, some more clarity in terms of the proposed garden walls and gates of sculpture garden that's going to be going behind 306 King Street in this case. Or sorry, in that space there. So that's been more clearly defined. Next slide. And also, just for case in point, I just wanted to reiterate that the additional area that we're asking for above the 6th floor is sitting back 64.5 feet roughly from the public street. as well as our 6-story, which is sitting back 32 feet. So we're going to great lengths to kind of create a building that visually appears as a 5-story building, taking out the F of that as well. Slide, please. So you saw this again. I just wanted to reiterate that there is no visual impact from King whatsoever. Also from the kind of sits equidistance in the block. There's also some buildings to the right of this on our project that are roughly, I think, 5 stories, 4 to 5 stories. Next slide. So one of the things that we were trying to in our original proposal that maybe we missed is that we wanted to talk about what the allowable building area is in respect to society. So one of the things that we were trying to do is we didn't want this to be simply an infill project. Our goal was to create a kind of completely resolved architectural solution. So it's all 4 sides. It doesn't just simply kind of carve its way in. The other thing is we wanted this to be something that was engaging. We wanted to participate in the public realm and create something that actually kind of enhances around the context of Charleston and would be something that kind of extends that legacy. So you can see kind of on the upper left-hand side, we have that's our allowable building envelope. And what we're doing is kind of carving away space that's going to end up going to the public realm. I'll show you the next slide. That diagram of how we're doing that. So this is just kind of trying to show the benefits of reconfiguration of the massing. So what you have in the upper left-hand side is you have our allowable building envelope. We kind of carve out our public proposed park area. And then we also are kind of dealing with the reference of the historic building that's also there. So we're kind of taking that area that we're kind of pulling the building back in deference to that historical building, taking that area, putting it on top. And then in order to kind of complete that solution, we need that additional area in order to kind of create what we, I guess, continue what we've established here. Again, more numbers, but this is sort of the diagram just meant to show sort of what the percentage is really relative to the entire project. And so if you were actually looking at what we're trying to bring additionally to the project, it represents basically 17% of that footprint, of the allowable footprint on society. So it's a very small portion, but I think it's significant in kind of sort of completing the idea and also giving something back to the city that I think is really exciting. Go to the next slide. These are just smaller comments that I know that the board had asked last time about lightening the color of the top. That's been addressed. Reducing the height. There was some clarification on like the rendering that we had. I think we were showing the glass laying a little too high. Those renderings have been resolved and put back into the project. Next. Just wanted to also be clear, there are some, seem like it wasn't quite clear that the 6-story that you're seeing in this rendering, which also does have additional area above that, that 6th area is what's being shown on that top. That additionally has been lightened as well in terms of its tone. And we'll go forward with that. Next slide. I think this is just sort of a recap. Keep going. So here, just also showing that this level 6 that we're looking at the top is set back, and that's what's actually visible from the street. And again, these are the same sort of contextual images that we showed in our previous presentation. So I guess what we're hoping is that if we look at sort of the criteria of the architectural merit, which I believe is sort of the 3-pronged idea, which is contribution to the public realm, use of high quality materials, and something that's contextually appropriate. I hope that we're at least, we should be hitting on some of those marks, I believe. And we're really excited to see how this project really participates.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions from board members? Or Story, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Is there any written public comment or public comment? Any written public comment?
There was one written letter that you received in your packet yesterday.
It was, and that has been entered into this program. Please. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Teresa Sanders, and I'm one of the property owners at 80 Society Street. Our property is actually visible in a few of those slides. And I'm actually here to support and to speak on behalf of Beth Ann Crane, who is the owner of Hughes Restaurant. Many of you probably enjoyed a wonderful restaurant. And she's got some very concerning items that she wanted to reinforce tonight. I know that she has sent in a letter to you all. And, you know, she feels that she can be in support of the project, but she wants the approval to be contingent upon certain conditions, primarily that she wants to make sure that the construction process isn't going to impact her building physically and financially. She's very concerned, and we agree with her and support her on that, is the vibrations from the driving of the pilings. These are two very historic buildings, and you know, of course, we've got a great concern about their integrity, especially if you're going to a subterranean level. And then we're also very concerned about her maintaining her business during the construction process, that Society Street is not going to be blocked off from traffic and people to get access to her shop restaurant. And we also have a concern we'd like to add that the 6th level, we're not sure what the purpose is of the 6th level, what sort of activities are going to be going on in that process, because we're concerned, we saw something about music and sound. So we're concerned about the residents who are 2 doors down and across the street, and there's an elderly home right at the corner of Meeting and Society Street, as you all know. And so we just want to be respectful for the people because it's a mixed-use area, the residents. So we did have a question about the noise level associated with, is it a bar up there? Is it, you know, what, if you can give us more information about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Jeff Roberts, and I'm speaking on behalf of the project. And as this board, some of the members of the board know and staff knows, we have been developing projects in the city of Charleston for upwards of almost 2.5 decades, and sort of design and exquisite development is in the blood, and I've been following independently the project. And I note, I for some reason love this process, called me a masochist, going through the crucible of getting buildings built. And when I see somebody who also takes extraordinary pains in sweating the details, has taken it from where it had originally been shown to you at the initial outset to where it has gone, I give great kudos to the development and design team for this particular metamorphosis with a subterranean garage, so that didn't affect the architecture of very sensible ingress and egress, pocket park, using the finest of materials. And it seems to me that this is a sort of shining beacon that can be illustrative of how the original merit height ordinance, VAR's permission to give merit height, is just a shining example. But we have never asked for merit height, but we've always go through height once through a city council process, through a more legislative process, but we've also never had 17% penthouse. So I would say, to point of praise from the Board of Zoning Appeals, it's an extraordinary and exceptional condition that does not create a slippery slope, and based on these buildings setback, minimal visibility from other spots. It's just, I know as a developer, these give and take in using this type of materials that are on this project and the metamorphosis, I just believe it doesn't create a slippery slope that other asks would be to this board on merit height, and it represents, from what you got the drawing online, 17%, because I would conclude that the give and take was really required for the programming to throw this type of resource of public art, pocket art, and recesses, I think it creates an extraordinary and exceptional condition without a slippery slope. And I would hope it would be approved in conceptual and further details get resolved in preliminary. So my compliments to the design and development team for creating such a magnificent project at a critical site.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
National Preservation Society of Charleston. To reiterate our previous comments, we acknowledge this is a good example of a project going back to the drawing board after being denied and returning with a high quality design that responds to Charleston's unique architectural character. Therefore, we are comfortable with the project receiving conceptual approval based on the success of the design. However, we continue to voice our strong opposition for the request for an additional floor. This building will serve as a backdrop to King Street, which is Charleston's most important historic corridor that has recognition and significance on a national level. The current zoning of 6 stories is already more than double in height than the majority of buildings in the historic context. 7 floors is far too many. Your task is to consider whether extra height is warranted based on architectural merit and context only. Finances are not a consideration toward extra height and have a purview for this board. Specifically, it's not appropriate to speculate that denying extra height may result in a reduction in quality elsewhere in the project. Architectural excellence should be demanded of any new project in the historic district based on the BAR principles. There is clearly no argument for an additional 7th floor to be contextual for this highly sensitive location. Please hold the line and deny this inappropriate request for additional height. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
I'm Stephen Hanson. I'm the Director of Historic Hanson-Borough Neighborhood Association, and we would like to reiterate what the Preservation Society just said. This building has made huge strides and has come a long way from where it was initially proposed, but there is not enough architectural merit to warrant an additional floor, and we would like to voice our opposition to it. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Any other public comment? Yes, please.
Christina Dunn, 42 Hazel Street, past board member, etc. Very active in Hansonborough. And I do applaud what Aaron said on behalf of the Preservation Society. And quite frankly, I like the architectural design. I like what they've done, and they've been very good with us. They've met with us several times, so thank you and kudos to them. In addition to not desiring an additional half floor, I would like them to be very specific about the noise mitigation. They said they have somebody that's looking into it, but I really feel, because sound carries like crazy. All you have to do is walk out on King Street, Main Street, and you can hear people playing music. So I'd like to know more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Lori or Lawrence?
All right, we'll do some staff comments. I would like to first address, as they come up on the screen, that comment number 1 and comment number 2 are going to be voided simply because they relate to a property line, and I just checked on that, and those 2 will be avoided. They involve encroachment permits. So we'll start with comment number 3. All right, these are previous comments, if anybody needs to see them from the board, but they were in your packet. All right, so we're starting at comment number 3. At building A, as the first floor detailing wraps the corner of the ground floor, the material and color of some of the trim elements changes. Specifically, the type of the recess and the horizontal mullion bar change material. While nicely detailed, consider if revisions to this would bring more consistency to the overall ground floor. I just read 4, I'm so sorry. Comment number 3, at building A, staff suggests simplifying, lightening, or reducing the cornice at the top of the floor. Jumping to comment that's listed as number 5. At building B, staff continue to encourage additional offset between the front elevation planes at the Society Street elevation. As massing is determined at conceptual review, it would be best to lock this into place soon. And that is in response to previous comment 2A. Number 6, at building B, sound mitigation is reviewed for aesthetic and architectural impact. However, amplification of music in the outdoor area, as well as hours for its operation, are to be informed by zoning and/or livability. That is a response to previous comment 2D. And number 7, at building B, the additional images indicate that the additional half story will not be visible, making for an ideal application of architectural merit if the board finds the project to meet the facets for a finding of architectural merit and context. This includes exemplary architectural and urban design, the use of the highest level of materials and finishes, and a contribution to the public realm. Staff recommendation is conceptual approval with board and staff comments, including extra height at building B through architectural merit and context.
Thank you, Tori. Would you like to have 5 minutes to respond?
So, just to respond to your comments about the noise. So the intention is that there would be a sound consultant that would basically try to mitigate that as best as possible. There is going to be a pool on that roof, but the idea would be that there would be a glass enclosure that would take care of all of it. So that will be installed. In terms of the idea, I guess the one comment that was made earlier in terms of the project and the architectural merit, I mean, the intention is that the building, I think it was a comment about the profit, but the idea is that this building would be something that would be constructed that someone would be coming to Charleston and taking a photo of. Perhaps would be something that they would take away as part of their architectural experience of being used. That's the intent of it.
Thank you. Board discussion.
Well, I know y'all are well aware that I've been highly critical of the provision in the ordinance for additional height for architectural merit and context. In fact, advocating right now before council that it be eliminated from the ordinance, but we have it, so we have to work with it. I spoke highly of this project last time. I still am very supportive of it, and I do think that it is architecturally meritorious for the additional height, especially considering how little additional height. It's not an entire floor. It's actually less than 20% of the total floor plate of the entire ensemble. And it addresses context by being literally invisible. You cannot see it. So I'm fine with the additional height. I do find that it meets the tests that are in our ordinance right now, the definition of architectural merit. And I think staff's comments regarding detailing, things like that, those are suggestions to study, but I think this project is in a very strong trajectory, and we ought to let the design team continue their work.
Thank you, Jim. Luda?
Yeah, I'm on the same level as Jay was saying. That additional story hardly make any impact on visibility of the street or architecture of the building. So, and the detailing, yes, it will be much more developed in the next level. And we're looking forward to see that. But I'm going to support staff and the recommendation for conceptual approval.
Thank you. Carol? See?
Yeah, I'd like to, I wasn't there at the last two presentations, but I followed the project since the initial request for the demolition, partial demolition of the Society Street building. And I was very pleased to see that the latest rendition the last time, and really have to compliment the applicant for redesigning it, having a fantastic site plan, where you actually see the circulation and you have a building that is that has 4 facades designed, because we very often see applicants coming to the board looking at a property that's irregularly shaped and they're just filling in as a regular shape. And now we have 2 very attractive buildings, very nicely detailed, contextual materials and contextual details. So it's a to compliment you. And in terms of the massing and the context, you could actually go to page 29, the way the architecture was massaged, or what, the way the massing was massaged, and a significant setback from both streets. It's almost like giving back to the public. So you have very narrow streets, and the way both buildings address that is really well done. There's an additional pocket park that was mentioned that's a little hidden, but I can almost imagine that this would be could be a secret destination, like the graveyard of the Unitarian Church or something like that. And in terms of context, there was this one slide. If you go to the central perspective that was shown, that really makes the case for the context, that shows King Street to have the lower scale, and the middle portion between King and Meeting Street has the higher scale. It shows other buildings. I think that the presentation, it really shows that the context, that I think this project meets the architectural merit and context requirement. It is pushed back. We'll try to find that. You could maybe help which page that is.
Should be slide 4.
Yeah, this one here. So you can really see how the project is far set back from King Street, and the portion that requires the additional height is even further set back. You can see a 7-story building in the back, Charleston Place, and other taller buildings. So I think in this case, it needs the context as well. And often when projects come and request the architectural merit, an additional floor, half a story, and the architecture doesn't quite meet it, it's very difficult for the board or for staff to come back and tell the applicant what's wrong or what's right. But I think this is a perfect project that you can show as a reference that is off Charleston, that has contextual materials and details, and meets those requirements. And support the conceptual approval and the additional half or quarter story or whatever it is, half a story.
Thanks, Carol. See?
My two biggest concerns are, one in the second page of the architecture or architect's responses, is that 306 King Street is not part of this project yet. It remains on the site plan, and we're not able to evaluate it right now. So I don't know what's happened since then, but it should be considered because it's on their site plan. Secondly, the visual impact of the building along Meeting Street. I don't see a slide that shows any of that outside of what's along Society and George Streets. You have one, it does have a King Street perspective, but there's nothing from Meeting Street, or at least not that I have found in this project. If you look back at old meetings where I've spoken, I'm never a big fan of height. Just don't think it's appropriate for the city. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen throughout the city. And I don't think that necessarily precedent of what this board has approved in the past is 7, 8-story buildings is necessarily appropriate for future buildings. However, in saying all of that, I do think that the level of architectural distinction that you brought into the project and the setback of the 6 and 6.5 floors is reasonable enough to be able to move forward with the project. So although I would love to see a 5-story building all the way across, I know that that's probably not going to happen. So, but outside of that, I agree with the rest of my colleagues.
Thank you, Sue. I feel the same way that my colleagues do. And I thank you for the visual impact study that you responded to the request from the board from our previous meeting. But like Seton, I did feel that we should have had that same study for Meeting Street. And if it's in here and I just missed it in my review, but I would like to ask you the question, do you feel that it is more visually impacting from Meeting Street than it is from King Street?
it's less. It actually sits much closer to King than to me.
But much closer to King, but with the King Street buildings, you can't see it at all from King
Correct.
Street. But
And
from,
on the other two corners as well, from George and Society, you can't. We do have a rendering that shows the kind of down the corridor on actually both.
north and south side.
And it is modeled appropriately with the additional area. It's the textual image. Next one.
Site context photos, is that what we're talking
Correct.
It should be slide 25. That's gotcha.
Is I have all these remarked. Oh, slide 16. Oh, good. Slide 16, I apologize. Yes, all right.
When they make the compiled PDF, your individual slides, it gets jumbled out. If you remember your sheet
I
number,
believe, yeah, that's fine. Yes.
what's the sheet number at the bottom right?
It does not have one. It's AP 205.
AB 205.
I'm sorry.
Next one.
In the presentation, I should read this.
Yeah, I mean, I've walked around this project site. I'm pretty satisfied with the sidelines from Main Street.
So I thank you for your commitment to the design and your response to the board. So, thank you very much. My second question to you is, have you completed an estimate and have you done value engineering already? And do you think this is going to change much between now and construction?
We have the intention that it will not. Being here in the site, where is it going?
Yeah. That's great. Thank you very much.
You're a braver man than I.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
I'll introduce one. Approval with board and staff comments, including approval of additional height.
Conceptual.
That's correct. Yeah.
Second that.
All right, so Jay's made a motion for conceptual approval with board and staff comments, including additional height. Is there a second to that? Luna seconded. Is there any further discussion? Karen, how do you vote?
In favor.
Stephen, how do you vote?
In favor.
Luna? Okay.
In favor.
And I also vote yea in favor, so it's unanimously approved. So thank you very much. Thank you. And thanks.
All right, you'll have a good evening. Here are my refusal forms.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Maybe we'll go out. Everyone's.
I wasn't projecting it. Thought it was at least 50-50.
Hey.
Yeah. Okay, the last item on our agenda is 74 President Street.
Yes, pass it around.
Thank you.
That'll be fun.
Tori?
All right, introducing 74 President Street. This one is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a 6-story, 89,000 square foot classroom building to the MUSC College of Health Professions. This height district is the 85-125, and it's in the Old City District. This area will show you the location. That's President Street on the left. A little bit closer view. That's the urban farm just above it. And then we've got some street images. That's the historic wall that you'll hear about. This building's just to the south. All right, we'll have the applicant present. Thanks.
One thing I wanted to ask first, we had asked earlier about having a few extra minutes for our presentation, just so we can get logged in for that.
Who did you ask that to? I was just
kidding. May I ask you?
That's fine. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Good afternoon. I'm Margie Longshore with SMHA. We're here on behalf of MUSC and the College of Health Professions, and I have with me Ryan Beltel, who will help with the presentation. He's our associated architect from Clark Nexon, and we do have Phil Mooney from MUSC if there are any bigger questions for MUSC as well. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. The College of Health Professions, you may have seen the article that was in the paper today. They are in growth mode and need additional space. They currently have 3 buildings on campus. 2 of them are on Rutledge Avenue. One is the old Charleston High School building, and then a newer building directly to the north. Those we refer to the College of Health Professions as CHIP A and B. So those are the CHIP A and B buildings, and then CHIP C is on the corner of B and President Street, kind of catty corner from where our new site will be. So that's our new site on President Street, and we can look at the next slide now. The long axis of the property faces President Street. We're directly north of the bioengineering and drug discovery buildings. Catty corner from CHIP C, we face the open green space to the east, and we're hoping to, plan is to maintain that as well as open space in the block. And we can take it to the next slide. So we put together this diagram to show some of the circulation issues, and then also explain the program a little bit. So the blue arrows coming to the building site are those pedestrian pathways coming from the College of Health Professions existing buildings, coming from President Street, and additional parking. We diagrammed the building early with the college. Their desire was to focus the lab spaces. These are large scale teaching labs that face President Street and face the offices onto the green space. And most of their current buildings, their offices do not have a lot of natural light, and that's a priority for the project, is to give their faculty access to light. And then those create 2 sides to the building, essentially, that are joined in the middle by support space for the building. The red arrow indicates the main circulation that goes through the building, and then connections to the bioengineering building to the south as well. And so programmatically, this building will house the Department of Rehabilitation Sciences. This is the physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech language pathology department. We'll have the large classroom labs like we talked about, offices and support spaces. There's also one particular office suite here for the Center for Rehabilitation Research and Neurological Conditions. So we've had a lot of great input, and the project goals for the college really are to create a welcoming building, lots of natural light like we mentioned, celebrate movement. So with the physical therapy and occupational therapy groups,
they want that to be the focus of the design. And then also to relate to the CHIP A and B buildings, and then also the greater NUSC context. So we are dealing with some site constraints that we started, it looked like a big open field, and then we realized there are things underground. We have some major electrical duct banks to the north and the south of the building that are pinning us in. On the left, there is a historic brick wall that runs along President Street. It really is about my height. And then there is some very large electrical switchgear and transformers on the project side of that wall. So we have to maintain clearance around those. And then to the east, we do have the open space, but there are existing oak trees right at the northeast corner of the building. So once we lay the diagram, program on the site, we see that we've got an opportunity to start to introduce that idea of movement into the plan to accommodate that oak tree on the east side of the project. Slide. And then looking at the site plan, you can see how our footprint developed, and we are maintaining the existing, there's an existing driveway to the north of the bioengineering building. We have to maintain that for truck access into the middle of the block, really. We are proposing to do a small vehicular turnaround. There are people that come to this building because of the programs that are there with mobility issues. So making sure that we have accessible, easy to get to entries is very important. Maintaining a lot of the existing sidewalk access around here, and then creating, as you come up to the building, a couple of hardscape seating areas, and then a series of ramps and steps to get you into the north entry. And then the south entry will be at grade, and you'll make that vertical transition inside the building. And then you can also see the large trees that we're planning on keeping everything, all the trees that are there, and working around them. Slide. So we'll go through the floor plans pretty quickly. The first floor is dedicated to the speech language pathology program. They have a mix of research and treatment spaces with offices. At the corners, the blue indicates open areas, the community areas, the main entry atrium at the northeast corner, grad student work area at the southwest corner, and then the entries, as you see, coming in at the north wall and then from the south toward bioengineering. Next slide. And then as we get to the upper floors, we get a more regular pattern of offices along the east wall, and then the large scale teaching labs along the west. The three spaces in the center, the support and shared spaces. And then the second floor will have that connector bridge to the second floor of the bioengineering building. Next slide. And the third floor again is offices with a large classroom space. And next slide. Fourth floor is very almost identical. Next slide. Fifth floor is planned as shell space for future growth they're anticipating. Next slide. Sixth floor is also shell space. And one thing to mention is when we get to the sixth floor, because of our zoning district, we do have to pull away from President Street. So there is a setback when we get to the sixth floor. Next slide. And we do, we have the mechanical penthouse at the top level to house all of the major mechanical and electrical equipment. MUSC requires that we do not have it at grade for flooding and resiliency issues. So that is all contained on at the rooftop level. Next slide. And then this is our roof plan. As you'll see in the elevations, we have primarily for all of this the roofs on the project. So I'll let Brian go over some things now.
Okay, thanks. My name is Brian Dotnell, architect with Clark Nexton, and I'll talk through a little bit of the exterior development of the project. So go to the next slide. So as Margie mentioned at the beginning, one of the main project goals that we were working with here was for the building to have some kind of architectural relationship to College of Health Professions, other buildings on campus, as well as the MUSC campus as a whole. So one way we want to try to accomplish that is through the use of the materials that we're putting on the building. So the photos here represent some images of buildings on that block around that site in on campus in general. And so one of the main things that we see consistently in that area is this precast concrete that's used, and typically that forms the base of these buildings. So we'll look to incorporate that into the design. Obviously, brick is a primary material on campus. You can see there's a wide variety from the historic brick wall to some of the newer buildings, a good bit of variation and detailing of that brick facade. So that will be a major part of the design as well. And then there's also, on some of the newer buildings, a fair amount of curtain wall and metal panel that's employed. It's typically used strategically to kind of highlight entrances or break down the mass of the building in certain ways. So that becomes part of the design as well. Move on to the next image. These just represent a couple photos of some of the most recent buildings on the USC campus. And again, you can see that same palette of materials with the precast concrete, the brick, and a good amount of curtain wall and metal panel. So that's basically the build context that we're trying to respond to with this project. We go to the next image. In addition to that build context, we also want the building to have some relationship and to express some of what is happening within the building as well, kind of learning what's going on in there. And we'll plan to respond to that in certain ways. The image on the top represents some of the educational material showing range of motion and movement that some of the physical therapy and occupational therapy students work with. On the bottom are a couple diagrams of muscle fibers, which might have some impact in how we detail some of the buildings. So there's this layering of these primary and secondary forms, which is kind of interesting. That might work its way into the architecture of the building. And then the image on the right is a painting from Marcel Duchamp of the Descending Staircase, which is in a way an example of how the idea of movement, celebrating movement, can be accomplished through something static like a painting. So that's something that we thought about, try to integrate into the design as well. So moving ahead to the next image. The next couple slides show some of the context and streetscape images. So this is along President Street looking west. So what we're seeing at the top is the Institute for Psychiatry. That's those two buildings to the left. The smaller building to the right, which is to the north, is the Chip C building, which is one of their research buildings. Next image. This is along President Street looking towards our site. So on the left, that's the Vince Mosley building, which is to the north of our site. This project occupies the center of the block, and the bioengineering is there to the south. You can see the pedestrian bridge connecting these two buildings. The dashed lines that you might see faintly there are trying to represent how we're trying to pick up on some of the horizontal datums of the surrounding context, trying to pick up and match the height of our precast base, the precast base of the bioengineering building, and then the step back that happens above the fifth floor lines with the top of the bioengineering. So moving on to the next image. So zooming into some of those exterior elevations, this is again that West President Street elevation. You see the base with the architectural precast up to the second floor, and then the primary facade of that west elevation is this brick facade with these large punched openings in them spanning multiple floors. And then within those larger openings, you have this pattern of curtain wall and metal panel. And you can see there's sort of a shifting pattern of the vertical mullions within those openings. Again, that's sort of a nod to this idea of trying to celebrate and express movement on the exterior of the building, trying to have that, do that in a very orderly way. Up above that brick volume, that's where the building steps back due to the zoning regulations. That sixth floor is primarily glass and metal panel, and then a house sitting on top of it. That's the kind of profile of the building. So now we're turning the corner to the south side of the building. You can see how that brick volume turns the corner on the south end. And then you notice there's a curtain wall gasket, basically, that aligns with a pedestrian bridge that separates the two main volumes of the building. And then we transition to the right, which is moving towards the east to a facade that's primarily metal panel curtain. Next image, please. So now we're looking at the east elevation. This is the side of the building that faces that interior curtain space. And like we mentioned, that's where most of the staff and faculty offices are. And there's a goal to kind of bring in natural light into those spaces and also provide some nice views for those folks that are working in those spaces. So that's why this side kind of opens up a little bit more. It's a bit more transparent. Also notice on the lower right hand of that image, that's the primary entry that's associated with the northeast corner of the building. So that's opened up to, again, to try to create that warm, welcoming entry into the building. Next image, please. And finally, the north elevation, again, you can see we have this curtain wall basket that separates those two main volumes. It's a bit larger on this side. It corresponds on the interior of some of those common spaces that happen along the north side. So it's bringing in a good bit of diffuse northern light into those common spaces as well. And then we transition back to that primary facade as it approaches Pleasant Street. Next image, please. Got a couple of sections through the building. This is cut lengthwise through the building. You can see the red dashed line towards the bottom. That's our flood elevation. And you can see that the floor plane, the first floor level is lifted a few feet above that. Also point out that the building, once you get to the second floor, cantilevers out a bit. That's in part due to some of those site constraints that we mentioned before, where that first floor footprint is really hemmed in by some of those underground utilities. But once we get above that, the building can kind of expand a bit to help accommodate the amount of programming. And then this is a section cut in the other direction. Again, you can see the red dashed line represents the floodplain and floor level up above that. So President Street is to the right on this image, and you can see the existing brick wall along President Street, and then that large existing electrical switchgear that happens just inside of that wall. And then we have our western facade that goes up and then steps back at the 6th floor for the zoning requirements. And then we're stepping back again at the penthouse level to try and reduce the visual impact of that. Now we have a few rendered views of the building. This is from the southwest corner, so President Street is in the foreground there. The bioengineering building is in the lower right. And you can see the pedestrian bridge connecting those two buildings. And then again, those two primary volumes right beside facing President Street. You can get a sense of how the height and mass of the building fits in with this surrounding context. This again is the west side facing President Street, primarily brick with the large openings with that kind of dynamic but ordered shifting of the moments within the curtain wall. Next image, please. Now we're moving further north on President Street, looking back down the street. Again, the brick facade along President Street, you can see that historic brick wall just in front of it. And you kind of get a sense of how the facade of this kind of continues that street wall that's established by the bioengineering building. That's what and now we're into the interior of that block, standing in that green space, looking at the east elevation of the building. Again, this is trying to open up that side of the building to maximize daylight and views into that interior green space. I believe this is the last image we'll finish on this, but this is again on President Street. We have the bioengineering building just off the screen to the right, so you can see the pedestrian bridge and how it connects into the two spaces, and then right underneath it, that's the southwest entrance that addresses the former President Street. So that's basically it. So thanks for your time. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board or Lawrence or Tori? Is there any written public comment?
There's none written.
Any public comment? Lori, city staff recommendations, comments?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to make one staff observation. While contemporary, the proposed project depicts a base, middle, and top as recommended by the BAR 2017 principles. The massing utilizes a smaller footprint than some of its neighbors, and the height nods to its neighbor directly to the south. While referencing the educational program this building will house, the facades utilize vertical fence, which through their placement enliven an otherwise very ordered facade. The architectural design honors its context through material and detailing. The proposed project will maintain the historic wall with minimal, if any, changes. The staff comment number 1 is while limited in visibility from the most adjacent streets, reduce the height of the mechanical penthouse as much as possible. And with that, the staff recommendation is conceptual approval with board and staff comments.
Thank you. Let me ask you to, if I'm on President Street, the brick wall is adjacent to the sidewalk, and this building would be to the east of that brick wall. How tall is that brick wall?
Portions of it are even with my head.
Yeah, so 5.5 feet.
The height of the penthouse, is that because of the equipment there?
It's tall. Right now, we finished schematic design. We're trying to move into design development. Our engineers have told us to assume 20 feet right now for the height of it. We are hoping that we can bring that down, and that as we move into DD, that we can continue to shrink it away from the exterior walls. But we just don't know that until we can go to the next level of engineering.
What is the material of the enclosure?
Right now, we're planning to have it primarily metal panels, a profiled metal panel. There will be some areas where we do have to have some louvers to bring in intake air. So we would try to find a louver and metal panel system that don't look extremely different from each other. So, like it to look consistent and as small as we can make it is our goal.
So Lawrence, with this application, if I ask you to go to page 22, could you do that? When I was reviewing it, it was page 22. I don't know. And these were comments that I'm going to make that were just my feelings when I was reviewing the plan. And I walk that street almost every day, and I when I look at the I'm going to call it the ground floor, the first floor, when it comes up and then steps out. When I look at it from that perspective, it feels top heavy to me when I look at that. And look at some of the other perspective drawings or other drawings, I don't feel the same way. So, but I want to make that comment, and then also the pedestrian walkway. There's a lot of development that's going to happen with that, I guess. But I don't feel comfortable with. I like elevated pedestrian walkways. I think that's great, but I don't feel comfortable with the way that it's shown right now. If we went to page 28. The small vertical window, when I look at it, it feels very narrow as compared to the large mass of brick beside it. We go to 29. So, when I looked at this on my large screen, it looked as if the clouds just continued to go through the building, right? And that's not really representative of the way it is. The mirrors and the glass don't really make the building go away, but this makes the building go away. And so I don't know how to feel about it. I understood the intent, but I wish that were were really the case. But I feel to some degree it hides what I'm really going to see from this. Even though I like the profile of the building as it's going across, I can't really see what that's going to look like, given the fact that the clouds just literally make it disappear. It looks like it's just a single wall that's coming in. We go to page 30. So the curtain wall that you were speaking of earlier, when I look at that, I like the planes and the blocks that are created and divided by the curtain wall, but when also the cantilever or the extension out of the upper section and the recessed lower section, it still feels heavy to me when you get up to that height, whether it's 10 feet up or 14 feet up from that first floor, and then you've got that horizontal band that goes all the way around. The rest of it is just vertically coming down into, and then the curtain wall breaks it all up, and I like the breakup, but it's it just feels, those planes feel heavy to me. And I definitely like the pedestrian bridge, but so there's a lot there that's going to be visible. And great care needs to be taken in developing that. I think that
I'd like to thank the applicant for the model. This is really great. Would have helped for the last project as well. With all the sidelines, this is really helpful. And I think I like the concept, the creative concept, and the very sensitive site planning, and the way you got to the shape. The cantilevering is kind of a result of the site constraints on the ground floor, and I think it actually works well. Because you have to deal with this historic masonry wall that's pretty tall. You want to really create a middle basement on top. And I don't mind the cantilevering. I think the building is very much in the spirit of NUSC, of the campus. I think we really integrated that into the project. Like the different materials and the way they work together. The only comment I have is on the northeast corner. Basically, maybe you could slowly go back, Lawrence, but where you have a two-story volume here, I think that the brick massing is fine, but you have the other massing that's hanging up in the air that's hanging over a two-story curtain wall. Doesn't seem to be supported. I think it's metal. It's meant to be metal panel, but I feel like if that volume would be the same height or would come down all the way to the base or to where the brick mass starts, it would be a little bit more balanced. Looks a little bit more like the other side, because there's a lot is going on with the building. You have the brick and the curtain wall, and the so I think I like the bold moves. I think it's the exact right location where you put that. But I think if it's a little bit more simplified, it would be even bolder and stronger. So if you go back one more slide, go forward to the west elevation where you see the curtain wall. Yeah, here this elevation. Here again, I think if that would be simplified. Right now there's a kind of a panoramic window that does not relate really to the floor plans. I think it could be just one treatment, the same treatment with the curtain wall, and then you really see the movement and the massing or the articulation that you created here in the floor plan. So that's only that northeast corner. I think if that could be studied a little further to be simplified. Other than that, I agree with staff recommendation.
Yeah, I'll share if no one else in Charleston has been able to develop their architectural brand, MUSC has. And I think that this really does complement the rest of campus nicely. So, bravo on that. and what others have shared as well. In one of the initial slides, you showed that it was almost two buildings that were put together, right? One side that was offices and one side that was lab space. And architecturally, it looks like you've done that as well. One side that faces President Street looks completely different than what is on the side with the green space. Having said that, the concrete on the first level wraps the entire building and is almost lost on the east facade. And actually, yeah, in this visual, where it looks like it's one mass, and I think breaking that up would work nicely on that side. And additionally, on the street view from the northwest side that we've discussed with the single side of brick before the curtain wall, I would ask you all to consider some sort of public art or mural on that space that might relate to either that school or the university as a whole. And outside of that, I think it's a nice job.
Okay, it's going to be a nice addition to the whole complex. Seems working well. I think creating this recessed pedestal and carrying the rest of the building is lighting up the massing of this taller building in that street. In some ways, this facade and the rest of it is kind of disconnect. It seems like different architecture altogether. But at the same time, I understand what is happening here and why is it happening. So, and I actually think that this subtle way of talking to the function of the building is sort of really interesting. Not that anyone will say, "Oh yeah, it's PT and OT and things like that," but at the same time, you know, historically, we always knew this is opera house. So trying to bring that function out is good. On the north facade, I actually don't think we need anything to do on that. It's two values there. It's solid and glass is open, and I think they're working really nice actually. I don't see that need to be reworked or added anything. That's actually kind of classical in the way of how solid works against the punch strip of glazing. All that said, I actually don't think that the roof is heavy. It will disappear in the sense of when you are on the ground. The question is that part is accessible from the roof, which is projected?
We have a 6th floor stepped back, not covered.
So it's just
right now.
Just stepping back, trying to respect the height and mass.
With the zoning that we're in, once we get above 85 feet, we have to be further set back on the street edge.
But you can have a roof overhang.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
that
is going
helps.
to be future space as well.
Yes.
It has the
floor is
ability.
shell space. Yes.
Yeah, but that helps. Right, that's kind of my observations quickly.
Thanks, Linda. Any other discussion, or is there a motion?
I'll motion for conceptual approval with board and staff comments.
Stephen has made a motion for conceptual approval with board and staff comments. Is there a second?
A second that.
Carol seconded. Is there any further discussion? Linda, how do you vote?
Yeah, in favor.
Linda votes yea in favor. Stephen?
Yea in favor.
Yea in favor. Carol?
Yea in favor.
Carol, and I vote yea in favor also. So unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. Thank you, Lawrence, Tori. Thank you.
Thank you.
We get to keep this, right?
Stay safe, Tori.
Okay, whatever.
Thank you, Luda.
Tori, is your family at home? Oh, she signed off.
Is it